Hello and welcome. On today's episode, we welcome Darrin Young from Hendrickson. Darrin, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you? Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having the time to join us today. So, as I do with most guests, I figured we dig into your background and, if you don't mind, kind of enlighten us on how you got mixed up into this industry of ours.
It's quite a long story. I started in the heavy truck industry with a company called IMT Corporation, or Ingersoll Axle. I was the sales manager for Ontario, Atlantic Canada, and the Eastern United States. I did that for about 5 years. Then I moved on to a company called SAF Holland. I was covering Ontario and Atlantic Canada for SAF Holland for about 16 years, both sales and a service capacity. From then, I went on to ConMet. I covered the ConMet brand for Canada for about 3 years. And then I think the travel absolutely killed me. I was away 3 weeks a month, and it was either I changed my job or my wife would divorce me. So I picked my wife over that one. Position at Hendrickson now. So I've been in the trailer and heavy truck market now for close to 30 years. And I've seen a lot of interesting stuff come and go, but I'm very happy to be with Hendrickson right now.
Nice. Yeah, it's a long journey, but definitely, like you said, all kind of tied into the running gear of the vehicles for the most part too.
Correct. And it's, with Hendrickson, it is nice because we have both truck and trailer. So when you get kind of a little bit tired of the trailers, migrate to the truck side, and we deal with the OEMs, we deal with installers, and it's exciting. It's never a dull moment.
Yeah, like I say, you touched on a whole bunch of different parts, which is kind of cool. And even, Hendrickson themselves, looking back, you don't realize how long these companies have been around for. Like 1913 founded. You're almost up on 100 years.
Exactly. And what's actually kind of funny is Hendrickson started out in 1913 as a truck manufacturer.
That's crazy.
We manufactured vocational trucks early on to that market, and then in I think it was 1926, we developed a suspension specific for our trucks called a walking beam. Everybody's familiar with the walking beam out there now. It's been out for years. Like we've got the model. The R and the RT model, but also the Hallmax is a type of walking beam. And so we patented that design. And we chugged along pretty good with that for quite a while. And then in the 40s, obviously the war hit. And we, just prior to that, the war starting, we actually sold off the walking beam rights to International, to Chicago-based company. So they had exclusivity on the walking beam design from Hendrickson. So what happened after that, obviously the war broke out, and because of the War Measures Act, they had to produce as many trucks and vehicles as possible. The government broke that contract, or the agreement between International and Hendrickson, and we were opened up to all the other truck manufacturers to supply the walking beam, basically for the War Measures Act. And then in 1978, we were purchased by a company called the Bowler Organization. And the Bowler Organization is our parent group. And in that organization, they had bumpers, a company that did bumpers for them. They did trim. They did a few other things. Springs, for example. We've got a facility up in Stratford, Ontario that manufactures truck springs and trailer springs up there. We've got another one in Mexico. And really, in 1988, we launched our first in-tracks into the market. Totally wrong. In 1988, we purchased a company called Turner Suspension on the trailer side. We bought the rights in Canada and the United States. So when we started to migrate away from the truck side, or not away from the truck side, but add to our portfolio the trailer That's why we purchased Turner. And then from that, we also purchased a company called Watson and Challen. That was another trailer and truck manufacturer, suspension manufacturer in 2007. So in Canada, the representatives for Hendrickson also rep the Watson and Challen version of our products. In the United States, they're two separate companies. So just really for geographical reasons, Hendrickson, I rep both the Hendrickson and Watson and Challen product. And then just last year, we purchased a company called Motor Wheel from the Stemco organization, and we also purchased the Cruisen product, the Slack product. So it's been an exciting time. The past 10, 15 years have been pretty interesting.
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, and they've been busy and, like you said, very, innovative. And part of, the nice part of these conversations is, kind of getting some information. I'm familiar with the suspensions. A lot of customers are between, spring or air, but really, you talk about the walking beam versus, an air suspension versus spring, like walk us through kind of what's really happening here between the different setups.
Well, it's funny when you look at Canada as a whole, almost the entire country is riding on air for vocational. And when I mean vocational, I mean dump trucks, cement mixers, all that, or not cement mixers, but dump trucks, just any vocational truck pretty much is running on air. But when you're in this GTA area of Toronto, everybody seems to migrate more towards the walking beam design, be it the Hallmax, be it the RT or the R on their primary drives. And I can't quite figure out why they do that. I know there's some benefits to go to that walking beam design. One of the benefits over an air suspension is travel. When you take a vocational truck and you go down a ditch and up a ditch and over a curb and so on, that axle has to articulate in a huge amount in order to take up and to keep the wheels essentially on the ground. Whereas an air suspension, it has limited travel and you get your wheels hanging up in the air in some cases. So perhaps that's the reason why the GTA has decided they want to stick with this particular design. But air suspension across the country, like for example on the vocational, it would be the Primax. The Primax seems to have the lion's share of the market out there in the vocational units. But I think that's really people assume that the Airride is a softer ride than what a mechanical suspension. And obviously, if you had a true walking beam and not a rubber block like the Hallmax has, it is stiffer. It's a rougher ride. You do get the articulation. You get up to, I think, 17 inches of articulation, which is pretty good. Mm-hmm. On an air ride, you're getting about 9 or 10 inches tops. So you can see you get that added travel that keeps those wheels on the ground. So we tried to migrate away from the plain walking beam where it's steel on steel, and we tried to add some driver comfort into it with adding the rubber components to the walking beam designs. So that's when you get the Hallmax. We have a new product that's being launched called the Ultimax. That is a rubber ride as well, but it does have the walking beam feature to it.
Gotcha. And I see that's important, I think, to know for our customers when, you just default to air, or spring setup, but really understanding, what is the application? Where are you going with this? Because like you said, my general knowledge is, the air ride is the smoother ride, right? So, and you see it obviously a lot in drive vans and trailers predominantly. But if you get into an area where, the axle's got to move quite a bit, off-road, uneven pavement, stuff like that. Yeah, you may want a smooth ride, but that suspension may be doing you a disservice because it's not really able to meet the expectations of the application.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. I'm not quite sure, like I said before, why the Ontario GTA area seems to cling to the walking beams. I personally like it. I've been in a truck with it, and it rides quite smooth with a Hall Max on it. And I don't really notice the difference between that and an Air. And there is some weight savings. You get some weight savings by moving to the Hall Max versus what you would in the Primax.
Right. Interesting. And then I guess tying in with that is obviously a lot of vocational guys. Then you're into your auxiliary lift axles too, and being Spiff compliant, right? So you've got two systems potentially working with each other from that point of view.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one. Early on, when people are doing these Spiff conversions, when you have a walking beam with no airbags, how do you calibrate that lift axle when you have a walking beam? And what they do, and I haven't quite seen the process, but I've seen it on a complete vehicle, where they put string gauges on the walking beam itself. So they can tell how much weight is on the drive axles by the amount of deflection in the walking beam itself. Then they can calibrate their lift axles. When you have an Airride suspension, it's really easy to spiff. So if you're in a Primax Airride, it's just a straight air conversion. Boom, boom, you're done. It's easy to spiff. Walking beams are a challenge, though.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I could see as being an issue, right? And it's interesting that one market tends to go towards that setup, and but still has to meet all those requirements. So clearly a bit of a challenge, but obviously from the previous part, the benefits outweigh, I guess, the challenge and the cost to potentially get it Spiff compliant.
Absolutely, it was funny. I was talking to our Western regional manager, and he has a fleet of cement mixers. The guy's buying cement mixers like crazy. And he puts Airride on all of his cement mixers.
Wow.
Said, I don't think I've ever seen an Airride mixer, but that's what the market is pushed for there, and so it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I know even from the trailer world, for the longest time, everything was Springride,
Yes.
And that was kind of the market. And obviously the transition came to the Airride, and the overall trailers changed as far as plate trailers from sheet and post and all that. But it's been interesting to see how the industry adapts to the different technology. Now, I don't know if you could find a Springride trailer, in the marketplace at all.
But if you look at the overall North American consumption of, say, trailers, say van trailers, I would assume that almost 40% are on Spring.
Yeah.
Canada is not really a big supporter of Spring. There are some large fleets out there that do use them. But in the U.S., if you look at all the Schneider National trucks or the Werner trucks running up and down the highway, those are big fleets. Majority of them are running on Spring.
Yeah, and I remember that from my trailer days is, you talk to the OEMs, the trailer manufacturers, and, everything we brought up here was Airride. That was the spec. But, even in Northeast U.S., it's Springride still,
And they don't have, I think on a Spring, you don't get the amount of weight allowable on a Spring versus an Air here in Canada. And I could be wrong, but I'd have to look up on that. But I think there is a bit of a weight penalty. So if someone cubes out before he weights out, Springride's not a bad way to go. Right. And actually, it brings me to another point. Obviously, springs are a big side of our business. Steel springs, we manufacture them all over the place, and we supply to every truck manufacturer for their spring beams. But we understand that there's going to be a change in the industry, and we're trying to get on top of this. And so that's why a while ago, I think it was early last year or maybe the year before, we purchased a composite spring. So look for composite springs to slowly make their entry into both truck and trailer markets.
That'll be interesting. I'll see same functionality, but from a weight savings, I'm sure there'd be a significant difference.
Significance, yes. And you get a better ride quality, I think, than you would a conventional spring. It allows for a little bit more flex. And so we're doing a lot of testing on these things still. We're exploring a few new avenues for it on the truck side and on the trailer side. So look for that to come in the next year or so.
That's interesting. And that's kind of the fun part as we talk about. There's always innovation going on in the industry. And, if you look at, say, as a trailer, it's a box on wheels, but there's a lot of technology going on behind the wheels and the suspension, everything. There's a lot going on that you don't see. And then, that's a one piece, the composite piece, which is interesting.
Okay.
And I know part of, I guess, outside of the ride quality, I guess, for lack of better words, is, there's some maintenance costs tied into the different systems, traditionally between the two, Airride to, a Springride system. Is there a significant operating cost difference between the two?
On the trailer side, I can only really go on what fleet managers are telling me.
Right.
Cases. Now, Springride, it rides well when you're full. When you're empty, it's terrible. And you got a lot of bouncing on the suspension, a bouncing of the cargo if there is any light cargo on it, and it causes some issues. When going to spring, really you just have to inspect to see if there's any cracks in the frames or in the springs themselves, and then obviously your axle maintenance. But in air suspension, you've got height control valves, you've got air lines, you've got air tanks, you've got all different things on there, and some people, some fleets, some larger fleets. Look at that as a cost they really don't want to incur. They're not maxing out their weights. They're not running full all the time. And Springride works good for them. So, we really let the market decide kind of where they want to go. Currently, we produce on a van trailer only in air suspension. We've looked at Springrides. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I would imagine we're exploring it.
It's funny you mentioned the spring suspension, like no load on it, bouncing around. I had an old '89 Jeep Comanche, which had a spring rear suspension, and that thing just would hop around, Yep. And in winter you put some brake drums in it. And yeah, you could keep it down on the ground without weight. It was bouncing everywhere. So I can imagine what a 48 or 53 foot trailer would be like with no weight in it, hopping down the road.
And that's why. And traditionally, a spring trailer, we're talking about a van trailer.
Yeah,
they use long cams, usually a 236 cam on that type axle that goes in that suspension. And when you have a long cam like that, the bouncing when it's going down the highway, it just beats out those cam bushings pretty bad. So that is a bit of a drawback on the spring. If you're running full all the time, hey, it's not a bad idea.
Exactly.
But on air, we're pushing the air.
Yeah, it makes sense, and tied into the air. I know from my trailer days, we were definitely talking and trying to get guys to look into the tire pressure control system. As it's an interesting technology that you guys offer, and I know there's different kind of levels of what the system can do as far as inflate, deflate, a bit of both, but the technology is, as we would talk to customers about it, especially from the GTA area. A lot of guys are running south. They're running to California, they're running to Texas, they're running to Florida. So you leave here, and today as we speak, it's 5 degrees. And you've got your air pressure, if you've done your proper circle check, you're at, 105 PSI and you're good to go. And then you head down to California. Well, it's going to keep getting warmer and the tires are running. You're probably nowhere close to 105 by the time you get down there, or vice versa. You leave at 105 by the time you get down here, you're way below. So it's maybe walk us through kind of what the system and what it does and kind of the value to the fleets as far as what it brings as a kind of a cost savings in tire wear and failures.
Well, tires are a huge expense for a fleet, and tires are not cheap. You get a super single tire with a rim, blow a tire. Usually if you're on a super single, you're in for a rim as well.
Yeah.
It's expensive, and it eats on your fuel economy as well. So not only are you losing tire wear, or you're getting tire wear, you're also spending a lot of time on maintenance, and fuel. So back in 2007, we launched our first tire inflation system. It was called the TireMax CP, and the CP stands for constant pressure. So all it would do was indicate that there is a leak or low pressure on a tire, and it would start pumping the tire up to a desired level. So that went, we kept that going for quite a while. And then in 2012, we launched a product called the TireMax Pro. And what the TireMax Pro does, it will sense a system leak and it will pump air to keep that tire running. Also, it will relieve tire pressure. So, for example, like you said, someone going to California from Toronto, there might be a 30-degree temperature swing, and that 105 might now be 135 by the time you get to California. So you're overinflated. So it will relieve the pressures in there. And what it has about a 7 PSI difference or range it operates in. So if you had 100 PSI, you set that system up, it'll go up to about 104, and then it'll start to deflate. Or it'll go down to 96, and then it'll start to inflate. So it's not constantly adding and subtracting air all the time. It operates in a bit of a float zone. The most important thing, I think, about the TireMax Pro is that it balances all the tires on the trailer. So, for example, if you're running a set of duals and the inner dual is running at 90 PSI and you're running 100 PSI on the outer dual, you've got a rolling diameter difference between those two. So the smaller tire is actually being dragged. That eats on your fuel economy. So what the TireMax Pro does is when you put air to the trailer, get it going, it immediately looks at all the tires and it gets all the tires up to the same pressure. So that I feel is probably the biggest benefit to these. If I've seen many tire fires out there where the inner dual will go soft and then it starts to collapse a little bit and then it starts to rub on the outer dual and then you get a fire. I've seen that numerous times out there, and that's really because there's no early warning of a tire issue. So the TireMax Pro really helps it. Just remember that, we've got the CP, which is constant pressure, so just pressure only. The Pro will add air, relieve air, and balance the pressures amongst all wheels. And then later this year, beginning of next, we're coming out with a new TireMax Pro. It's called the TireMax Pro LB. And what that will do, it will sense how much weight is on your axles, and it will adjust the tire pressure accordingly. So it's the benefit really is for people that go out full and come back empty, beverage people, a lot of tankers will go out full and then they make drops during the day and then they come back empty. Well, 100 PSI set at cold pressure would be way too much for an empty trailer. Those aluminum trailers are very light without a cargo on it, and it just beats them to death. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take a lot of the guesswork out of the fleet's hands and say, listen, this will monitor your weight you're carrying. It will adjust the tire pressures accordingly. Now, this is something that we were planning on launching last year, but unfortunately a virus came and forced everybody to pull in their horns a little bit and put everything on the back burner. And then now with the industry exploding, trailers are hard to come by, trucks are hard to come by, everybody's running at max capacity, and componentry is tough to get. So it really threw a wrench into our plans, but we're staying afloat and hoping to have it launched sometime this year.
Right. And it's a cool technology because I liked it when I was doing the trailers. The Pro I liked because of that. It inflate, deflate, and it definitely, like I said, took a lot of the guesswork out and it equalized all the tires, because that traditionally would be the challenge. When I did the rental world, you'd come in and every tire is a different pressure, right? Or you have a blowout, one tire is sitting higher than the other. Like there's so many factors that impacts the tire wear that as you talk to the guys about it, just the fact that what this does equalizes and maintains the proper pressure you need to that. So right off the bat, fuel economy is maximized.
Yeah.
You don't have tires underinflated, overinflated, that hampered fuel economy. But then the blowouts, like you said, right? The cost of one blowout, in the middle of Louisiana at 3:00 in the morning, there's the cost to have the guy come out, do the tire, if you've taken out a rim, but then there's a downtime. You've missed the delivery time for your load. You may get penalized for that. Like, there's so many factors that once you had that conversation, the cost of the product was really null and void because one blowout, one service call that you would probably get anyways more than offsets the cost. And so now the idea of the new version coming out, with the weights involved, like you said, the beverage guys especially, they go out heavy and it's a diminishing load, so it changes throughout the day. And that definitely plays havoc on the tires, and the weights involved. And, those are guys, especially on load, no one wants a blow up, but definitely at the loads they're carrying, you don't want tires going either. So the fact that, and, it's a peace of mind for the fleet owner, right? Knowing you trust the drivers, they have a circle check, they're supposed to do what they're supposed to do, but no different than we see in the trucks as far as the safety systems with regards to the driving aids. This is kind of along that line where it helps take some guesswork out of the day-to-day routine, because checking tire pressure can be a, task. You walk by, you have to give it a kick, you get your hammer out, and the hammer is definitely a good tire gauge, but this helps take some guesswork out, right? I did the value, and it's nice to see the technology that gets ever evolving. Just inflating it was cool, but now you're to the point where you can pull in weights, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, another thing too, with the Tire Max Pro, you'll notice when you're driving down the road, you'll see trailers with the Tire Max Pro on it. There's a light in the front of the trailer, and it's a white light, and that light will go on when the system is pumping. So when you first fire up the trailer, your Tire Max Pro light will go on because it senses that it's pumping air to the tires, and it's doing. It's getting all the tires balanced properly, so it's adding, subtracting, it's doing something. So it's not uncommon for that light to stay on for up to 15 minutes. Then it will go off. If it doesn't go off, there's a leak somewhere that the system can't keep up enough pressure. So you have to investigate for leaks. Currently, the Tire Max Pro will not tell you what tire is low. So if you've got a 4-axle unit out there, duals on it, you're crawling around trying to find it. And it could be a bit of a pain. And we realized that in Hendrickson. And we are coming out with a new system. It's called the Watchman system. And what the Watchman will do, it works in conjunction with the Tire Max Pro, but it will be able to tell us where the leak is. It will also sense wheel end vibration, end play, and it will relay that back to the driver or dispatch. So it's smart technology coming through more so with electronics into our industry. And we're just trying to make it safer for people out there on the roads and safer for just general vehicles. We don't want to wheel off anywhere, and I'm sure fleets don't either. So we're trying to make it as safe as possible.
That's a pretty huge advancement, because you think it's one thing to make sure the pressure's even, right? Yeah. Which helps. But yeah, to your point, if it's constantly running, clearly you've got a leak, which means you're imminent time away from a failure at some point. Yeah. But yeah, you got to go find it. But I mean, so it's already cool that you could at least identify you've got a problem, which is half of the issue of solving it. At least you've got something to look at. But nowadays with the technology, if you can pinpoint down specifically to where the problem is, for a fleet owner, and if it's getting relayed to them, they can be in touch with the driver before the driver has any clue something's starting to go wrong. Arrange service, arrange all this ahead of time. And all this is about maximizing the uptime and limiting the downtime, which is again is cost to the fleet, right? But it's interesting to see the technology that is coming quickly to mitigate all these little issues that 10 years ago, that's it. Yeah, you have no choice. When tire blows, you fix it. That's kind of how you address that problem,
Well, I'm thinking even on the truck side, you have early warning lights that come on in your engines all the time. Well, if an engine blows, well, it coast to a stop, right? But if you have a wheel end failure, thing's coming off and it's going to hurt someone. It's dangerous. So we're trying to find ways to give you early warning, give the dispatch early warning, and avoid the downtime. So that's what I always tell people. They're always concerned about the engines and everything else, and I think that's wonderful. But since when did an engine come off a truck and kill someone?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we've had, our fair share of them here in the GTA over a handful of years. It's been a little bit quiet, which is great, and it's good to see. But I know we had one summer there where it was constant. And so, anything you can do to give the fleet owners or the operators a leg up as far as identifying something before it becomes a catastrophic failure. Like you said, wheel ends never end well. At the speed they're going, at the weight they're carrying, it's on a highway, which is usually 2 lanes going opposite ways. And, chances are it's not going straight down the road where everything's traveling. It's headed the other way. So any signs you can give guys ahead of time, I think is extremely valuable for everybody.
I agree. And we have to be able to link the trailer to the truck electronically somehow so that it can give the drivers warning. I don't know how they're going to do that. People smarter than me are working on there's all kinds of communications. They want to be able to capture air pressure in the bags and vibrations and heat and all that kind of thing. It is coming. I think with our first generation of the Watchman coming out here shortly, it'll address things like heat, vibration, heat, vibration, and tire monitoring. But we want to expand on that even further. And hopefully that'll be launched again. Like I said before, we wanted to launch it last year, but this horrible virus is afflicting everybody. It could have put everything on the back burner.
Yeah, it's thrown havoc. Some guys have thrived, others haven't, but it's been a shift. And like I said, this year, everything's ramped up, I think, a lot quicker than most had expected. And now it's about getting components to the OEMs to build everything, and you guys are part of that supply chain as far as having enough product to meet the demand, and you being able to get enough parts to build your product to meet the demand too is the challenge of this year.
It's raw materials. Steel is in short supply, so we're scrambling for steel. I'm sure on the truck side, you guys are scrambling for semiconductors and all of that. I'm sure that's put a wrench into a lot of production.
Definitely.
Everybody's been challenged over the past 14 months with this. We'll get out of it. We have launched we have opened up a new facility just outside of Canton, Ohio. And we're going to be manufacturing in-tracks and van-tracks product there to supply the market. But we're having a hard time getting people back, getting raw material, getting people back. It's a tough sled, but we'll get her open.
Yep. No, I think we're on the right track slowly, but we're getting there, and it's interesting. And I kind of been talking to other people, and as we dig into the different components, and this was no exception. As we dig in, we find out that there's way more to it than just suspensions, and you guys have a lot of technology kind of behind you you're digging into, and I think it's pretty interesting. It's a fun time to be in the industry as far as the technology and the communication and what you're able to do with these systems that probably weren't even fathomable 15, 20 years ago. It's pretty impressive. Absolutely. It's
a challenge, but we'll get there.
Definitely. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, fill us in, give us some vision of what's coming down the pipe with the composite springs and the new technology on the tire inflation systems and everything else tied to it. So greatly appreciate your time and indulging us with what to expect in the near future.
Great. Thank you very much.
Well, that concludes our episode today, and I want to thank Darrin for his time and joining us. And as always, be sure to subscribe to get notifications of new episodes, and thanks for listening.